right, hello everybody. We are back, Ep.4 of Up and Aware podcast. Today we have Niyonu here with us. Um, Before we get into like the questions, I just want to give a quick breakdown of like the podcast, what it's for, kind of the point and the reason why I wanted to start this, and the reason why I wanted you to join as well. Um, this podcast is really, I want to focus on the awareness of sort of everything that we do as artists, as creatives, entrepreneurs. I feel like a lot of times when I'm listening to podcasts or interviews or anything on YouTube or reading books, maybe, that they don't go over the awareness aspect of it as much as I would like. And I feel like to me, that's the part that I like to, that's how I really get to know the person. I feel like is by telling their story, but like weaving in the intricacies of like their thought process back, 5-10 years ago. So I really wanted to create a show that kind of focuses on that aspect of it. And so we will kind of go over the basic questions, getting to know you, your background, your story, talking about the things that you want to talk about, talking about music, talking about the school project, and whatever else comes up.
Nice.
And so we do have like an exclusive segment later on towards the end of the podcast with some of the questions that we reserve for a platform called Buy Me a Coffee, which is Patreon, like Patreon.
Right.
It's $4 a month to kind of subscribe, and people get all those bonus questions at the end of the interviews. So
Nice.
the more interviews we do, the more that they'll be able to see. And I do want to come up with a different segment too, that is also for the exclusive members to kind of get them more content. I'm not sure what that is going to be yet, but hopefully sometime soon I can figure that out and get some people back again for that exclusive content.
Yeah, absolute.
Okay, so that's kind of like the general groundkeeping, I guess. So can you introduce yourself and what you do for the people watching?
Sure. I am Niyonu, first of all. I was born Gwendolyn Denise, and I still use those names to a certain extent. And I oftentimes say, like, if there was like one core theme that goes across everything that I do, it is about bridging false dichotomies and making the truth more visible. So that has expressed itself through always through my music. The music is my second language. My family were musicians. So music has always been there. And then somewhere along the line, I got a pull to organizational development. So I've done a lot of consulting with organizations about how they can more effectively be who they've come to be. And then I taught high school for a number of years. And so more recently in my life, I've felt a pull to start a school that would really be for the purpose of liberation.
Okay.
So I could say more about that. So those are kind of the corners of my my pyramid.
Okay. And so did you say that in sequential order? So was music first, you said?
Yeah, music was first in all ways, and has actually reasserted itself now in the later part of my life. I find myself really feeling very free to create in a more pure way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first song you created, now I know a lot of people, artists, they write a lot before they actually get in the booth and record or anything like that. Were you somebody who wrote a lot for years and years and then decided to make a song, or did you always know that this was a song that I wrote and I'm going to go into the studio and get it produced? Like, what was that first song like?
No. Yeah, I had songs, lots of songs that I had written. Some that maybe a group sang. Um, so yeah, I wrote a number of years before I ever walked into the studio to sing my own songs. I sang some backup in New York and stuff like that before that, but I mean, it wasn't as accessible, first of all. So it was such a big deal to record a song or to say I have a record was like huge. Like now it's like, yeah, so what is it like? People be like they don't just get hyped because you say you have a record.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if you had songs that you written before? What was the turning point or the catalyst that made you want to say, okay, I'm gonna go and create my first record?
Yeah. Well, the very first was putting some coins together just to get in the studio. So it wasn't even like I'm going to create a record. It was like I have some studio time. And I remember it was like 2 hours to go into the studio. And I came out with like 12 or 13 songs.
That's impressive.
Well, I mean, it was just because it was like, put the piano, like sing one song and then sing another song. And I still have that. I still have that cassette tape from that recording. And it's funny to me to think that, and that's what I talk about. Like when you have that purity of youth and you're just like, okay, all right, so now let's do the next song. Now let's do, and it has to be perfect. You're not going to keep going over and over again. And then also the mechanism at the time, like to splice something was literally razor to tape.
Wow.
So that notion of, like doing it over or making a slight change was so real. So I walked out with this cassette tape with I think 10 songs on it, and then started trying to sell that, see if I could get some people to like pay a little bit of money for the cassette so that I could cover costs of going back into the studio again. Yeah, and it was just hype. It was just exciting. It was a real acoustic piano. So sometimes just like laying the piano part first, and then going and singing.
Okay. So was the studio in New York? Was it in Philly, Jersey?
The first studio where I did this was in Jersey. It was in South Jersey. Actually, a really cool, simple studio that then he got he upgraded and started. I remember the first time I went to his studio again, to this new studio, and he would say people were making beats in the other room, and I was like, what do you mean making beats? Sorry, I'm just going back in time, right? This notion that people were just sitting in a room like making beats. I was so like, I don't know what's going on right now. So, but then of course we had a system then where you could re-record very easily and start laying and overdubbing and then all of that. Yeah. I didn't start using a Philadelphia studio until several years later with my singing group Tribe One. And then we did our first album in a studio called Turtle. Oh, no, we didn't. No, we didn't. We did our first album in a studio. That's right. We were still splicing a little bit There were others that were using more digital forms, but this guy was he was kind of old school. Did an amazing job. And right at the same time we were recording that, I did my first solo album at the same time, and that was in New York.
Wow. Okay. So a lot there. We got to rewind a little bit. So that first cassette that you had, 10 songs on, the first time you went,
Yes.
what genre would you say you were creating for that?
I would say that was, if I had to give it a title, I would call it Afro folk,
Okay.
because there was some of it that felt a little straight folky, and there was definitely a strong, like, kind of world beat to a lot of it.
So was that a genre that was popular back then? Was it like, did you feel like that was sort of a new blend of music coming together?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, I have literally never been drawn to music based on what was popular at the time. Um, so it was music that flowed through me in the way that it did. And then, of course, I was, influenced by what was out, Earth, Wind, and Fire, like, various um, pop singers that I would say leaned a little bit more to message music. I've always had a strong kind of mysticism, spiritual aspect to myself. But then, I loved Roberta Flack, Nina Simone. I mean, there were also just vocalists that I loved. So it ended up, like, if you were to think about Nina Simone, for instance, like, what category would you put that in? I mean, she was in the jazz section of the record store, but she doesn't, you can't, like, put her in a, you know what I mean?
Right.
And oftentimes, Nina Simone is a singer that folks will sometimes compare me to, or Odetta, who's like a folky. Yeah. What you gonna do?
That's very interesting because I always was into folk growing up and still am. So that's,
Really?
and I've recently got more into African music. So I feel like for
Oh,
you to
there you
say
go.
African folk is like it's very coincidental.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so would you say that you're the only one at the time that making that kind of music?
Um. Well, first of all, let me say that cassette, I covered a few songs on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so they weren't all my music. There were probably 3 or 4 songs on there that I wrote, and then I covered some songs that were out during the day, but sort of switched the message to a more spiritual, a little bit religious. I'm not as religious now as I was at that time in my life, but
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
after the cassette, you mentioned a group, Tribal One, Tribe One,
Tribe One.
Tribe One. So
Yeah.
how long after that first cassette did you get into a group, and kind of what was that like?
Right. That's a really good question. And I majored in voice in college. So that,
Okay, I didn't know that.
yeah. So I went to an arts high school in Newark, New Jersey. And so I was always singing, always, getting together with other, like, kids and being like, let's do this and that and the other thing. Then went to college. Same thing. I was a voice major, but then I would, like, sing in the snack bar and like, do, you know, all kinds of, and that was very much straight up pop music. Yeah. So it was after all of that, my young adult kind of married life, that I made that cassette. Um, Tribe One I formed. Um, my sister and I always had this vision of like going on the road and singing together. And when I got married, she was like, "What happened to our dream?" So I got married, I had kids, but then I told her, I was like, I want to start this group. So we started Tribe One, and there again, it was mainly my songs, my music. Um, and we started off being around 6 members. And then at our largest, we were 12 members. So it would just be vocals and conga drums and a little bit of piano.
Okay.
Hmm.
When you got to 12 people, was it literally everybody had an instrument and then there's like 5, 6, 7 vocalists?
Yeah, no, it was, we would have like maybe 2 drummers
Okay.
and hand drums, always hand drums. And then I might be on the piano, or my sister might be on the piano. And that was usually the instrumentation.
Okay. So way more vocalists than
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was like, pretty intricate vocals, kind of a la Sweet Honey in the Rock. And we do these shows, and we had got a chance to perform in Nicaragua, and we like travel and sing, and people always have a hard time categorizing us because they'd be like, "You're not a gospel group." And you're not, and people are always having a hard time categorizing.
That's hilarious. So you start this group.
Hmm.
Um, you said you were married at this time,
Yeah.
and then your sister was like, after you got married, it kind of like the idea was kind of harder to make happen.
Right.
And then at one point, it happened.
Yes.
Was it you initiating that, or was it your sister initiating? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was me initiating it. It was me kind of dreaming into who should be the singers. It was, there was white folks, there were straight, there was gay, there was, like drummers, and that was part of why people, like, just on the stage, folks would look and be like, what is this? And then you could see a certain point in, like maybe 3 songs in, because we were always very interactive with the audience. We grew to a place where we wrote a song with the audience every performance.
Wow.
So we would ask, like, who has the first line to a song
Wow.
that feels like it's of this moment. And somebody might just say the words. They might say, "Smile out loud." And we'd be like, we'd look at each other, and somebody would be like, "Smile out loud. Smile out loud."
Wow.
And then the audience would learn that. And then I say, "Okay, who has the second line?"
That sounds really fun.
Oh my God, it is. I just wish the one thing, we ended our time together in 2017. But my hope was that we would do an album of songs that were written with the audience. We recorded one that we did with a group of 4th graders. Oh my God, that was the most amazing song.
I can imagine.
Right, it was 4th graders, but they just would raise their hands, and somebody had the first line, second line, third line. We usually did about 4 lines, and then created the song.
So you ended the group ended in 2017.
Yeah.
When did it start again?
It started in 2000. No, in 1994.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you go from starting a group to then traveling, and you named a few countries you went to?
Mm-hmm.
Like how does that Just gained traction quickly, and then it was just booking shows was easy, or how did
Well,
that go?
it's so, and I know this is almost like trying to describe what phones were like before there were cell phones, because I literally would make a flyer, like, and then like copy the flyer
Mm-hmm.
and like spread it out to different people and then see what we could book. Um, One of the things that we were able to do, because I had taught high school, I knew, and it was a private school, I knew the private school world a little bit. So we could do a tour of schools. Um, what was the other thing? So people would hear us, and like we got to open for these like big acts.
Really?
Yeah, and it'd be like, well, Richie Havens is coming to Princeton to be the featured artist for, some peace organization. It's a big fundraiser. But we heard about Tribe One. Would you be willing to open? Like, open for Richie Havens? Same thing for Olatunji. I don't know if you know who he is, but this like very, very famous, probably the most famous West African drummer
Mm.
that has ever been known. So Olatunji, and we got to open for that show. And then Sweet Honey in the Rock right here at what's what's the big what's the big theater here in Philly where the big shows are?
Um, Up on Gerard, Broad and Gerard.
No, downtown, right downtown here. The biggest art center in Philly.
Oh my goodness, I don't even know.
Right downtown here. Well, we have to splice that in. But anyway, Sweet Honey was performing there, and we got to open. It's a funny thing, how community is, and the community of. I think what it is the more kind of radical or activist kinds of communities and the artists that they follow. There's you just have a push behind you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of I think if there was a category that I think we fell in terms of people's mind, because they knew it was message music, and they knew it had themes of change and justice in it, and it was spiritual but not so much religious. So
Mm-hmm.
then that's where we landed.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we'd tour, we'd go south, or we'd go to the Northeast and just drop into these various places.
So because as I'm listening to the story, married, kids, teaching,
Yeah.
music, touring. How did you manage all of that, and what do you feel like you gave
Mm.
up to do the music?
Mm-hmm.
Like what you were sacrificing?
Huh. I I in all honesty cannot think of the music in that way at that time of my life. So the marriage ended right around the time that Tribe One had its first big performance outside of the area. It was in Texas, and we
Okay.
went to this huge gathering, outdoor gathering called Wolf Song, and yeah, the marriage ended a little bit before that. So then all those years, because that was like in '95, so we hadn't been together that long, and my kids just, they were at rehearsal. The rehearsals were at my house. It wasn't like I was going somewhere all the
Right.
time. And then if we were on tour, it was a short spell. Um, I feel more like I'm sacrificing in some ways at this stage of my music more than back then.
Why do you say that?
Um, yeah, I think because there's aspects of the music industry now that feels so much less organic and so much less communal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, though it's funny, like, I question how much of that is because of, like, I just haven't learned how to hook into certain types of communal aspects, like here. I see stuff going on here at Rec Philly, and I'm like, some of that stuff looks really cool. Um, I wonder how I could connect to that. But otherwise, it's like social media. It's the occasional show. I think because my most recent album came out during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
um, that I'm so aware uh, of the distance that exists right now. Definitely did then in 2020 when the album came out, but even still, there's there's a thing there. I don't know. Do you feel that?
I mean, maybe not so much in with music particularly. I mean, I was never when the pandemic happened. I was still in Maryland at the time,
Oh,
so
okay.
I was kind of like out in the county, kind of not. All my friends were up here. I didn't really hang out with anybody in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I
Mm-hmm.
came back to Philly, it was definitely yeah. Things felt a little harder. It felt a little colder as far as just trying to build relationships. Just wasn't as easy, and
Yeah.
people were a little bit more obviously guarded, from in person, and even just everybody kind of kept in their bubbles. It felt like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 And I mean, age is definitely a serious factor in the sense of I feel as dynamic in terms of creating and um, as excited about a new song that's coming through me as I did when I was, 24.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that my peers, they're like closing up shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, what's going on? So I feel very out of sync that way.
Okay.
I feel very out of sync that way. And even if I looked at who was at the bigger show that we did in September, they were a lot of 30 something, 40 somethings. There was a few old heads there, but that was just because I had guilted them into into being there, and they were sitting there with their masks on,
Uh
and
huh.
so it's a strange world in terms of that.
So
Um,
so 2017, the group
hmm
ended. What what was life like after? Were you still doing music? Did you take a break from music?
Yeah, I went into like a void for a little while because a lot of folks were like, "Why is Tribe One ending?" Like our final show, which was downtown here in Philly. I remember at one point I asked in the audience like how many people were seeing Tribe One for the first time, and it was like a third of the audience. Um, and when people were coming up afterward, they were like, "Wait a minute, what do you mean it's ending? This is my first time seeing you," but I just knew in my heart that the way it was, the way that I felt it was that Tribe One was blocking something for me, and I couldn't know what that was until it ended. Um, and so there was probably like a year, almost 2 years, where I was like, I don't know what it is, and then this music started bubbling up, and me as an artist started coming through in a way that it hadn't since I was, probably in my 30s. Because the thing about leading a group is you start, all the music that's coming through you immediately start thinking about, like, okay, who can sing this part? Like, how do you make it into parts?
Okay.
Um, and and it just felt like it was time for me to have a different experience of myself as an artist.
So would you say that being in Tribe One, if you would have kept that going, and if that would have still been around, that you would have never found the artist that you saying kind of emerged after that year or two break?
Yeah, yeah.
And was that like? Do you feel like that was a drastically different voice artist? Like what you trying to say, or was it?
Yes. Well, I think that what I was trying to say feels very similar. Um, because it still feels to be, about awareness, about truth, about love, about sensuality. Probably the sensuality part wasn't as much in Tribe. Um, but what feels different is my actual voice, my singing voice. Like, I don't know if like choir directors, like, they kind of wear their voices down because they're like singing everybody's part, all the time. Tenor part, alto part, soprano part. And you lose, for me, I would say I really lost my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first started working on the last album, and I went back to an old college friend, Danny Madden, who's a producer in New York, and I was like, I have a couple of songs I would love for you to listen to and think about producing for me in the studio. And I felt very like little girl, like very shy about it. I just lost that like sense of just me. And he was like, okay, is this going to be Niyonu the songwriter or Niyonu the artist, the vocalist, the artist? And I was like, well, really, I just want to get the message out. I want he says, you're thinking like a writer, but
So that was an interesting like
yeah,
situation he brought up, or
yeah.
perspective.
No, it was, yeah, it was very real. It was very real. And he said, and he would keep saying to me, you are Niyonu the artist. You are Niyonu the artist. And it took a while.
And then that you feel like that once that sunk in, that was kind of like the thing that kind of put you over the top as far as feeling like the artist and kind of really embodying the
Yeah,
music.
yeah. Yeah. And he did a little vocal coaching with me. It was just like maybe 3 sessions that got me back to myself. Um, and, if you were to listen to Sit Down, and that was the song we were working on, there's when I listen to it myself, I oftentimes think half the time I sound like my sister, who has totally followed a singing career. So she didn't step off of hers. She,
Okay.
and yeah, yeah, there's something about your craft that, like, when you're thinking of your art and you're really working it as a craft, it's a totally different thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that's what I got back to.
I think that's interesting that you brought that up because I kind of felt a similar way when I went to art school at UArts. As
Mm.
a filmmaker, going to school for film, I was around a whole bunch of like artists. I felt like were actual artists, like vocalists, dancers, painters, illustrators, and
Mm.
I felt like I never classified myself as an artist until like maybe junior year, where kind of like how you were saying, I didn't. Once I accepted that identity as an artist, I feel like that kind of made me feel more comfortable in what I was doing.
Mm.
I always felt
Mm.
like because my art needed like cameras, 10 people, 5 to 10 people on
Right,
set, a
right,
script that it took 3 months to make. Like I
right.
couldn't break out and do my art. I had to plan it and I had to work with other people. So that kind of made me feel like there was a barrier between me and becoming an
Mm.
artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's kind of similar
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect with what you
Mm-hmm.
just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could imagine that. Um, I'm curious whether the part of you as a filmmaker that has a vision for it, like it would feel like that part would feel very much like art.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
when I felt, it was definitely a journey. Um, but yeah, I think to your point, it's like the vision and the um, just having something in your mind and making it come to life is really, to me, is kind of like what art is. It's like the
Yeah.
canvas, your brain is like just thinking about it, but whatever canvas or medium it comes out is the art.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's hard to execute. It takes practice, it takes repetition. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
whatever, what they say, 10,000 hours is like kind of how you get professional or get a
Mm-hmm.
mastery of a craft.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like with
Mm-hmm.
with whatever art you go through those trial and errors, and I feel like although mine was took a little bit more to create, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of realized that that was kind of what I was doing and what I was creating.
Right. Right. And I would think that, the degree to which you need outside um, instruments, whether they're cameras or whether they're keyboards or whether they're Logic, the
Mm-hmm.
recording tool, like the degree to which you need them to convey would, I think, have a direct correlation to how distant you could feel from the creative aspect or the art until you've mastered
Mm.
till you've
Yeah.
mastered those things. Um, and that's why the voice is probably the creative mechanism that you have such immediate access to. It's the only thing that you don't have to, because I play piano and I oftentimes use learning piano as an analogy for people in terms of practice or mastery, because at first you literally are playing with one finger
Mm-hmm.
and then you're adding each finger, and then your hands are together, and then you go beyond those 10 notes and each one of those steps feels like a big huge leap, and then you're like,
Yeah.
how do people play with two hands at the same time?
I still never I took one piano class in college. I was like, let me do my creative electives. Let me just try something new. Like just the whole coordination was just, and
Right,
then the foot, then reading, then playing. I was like, this
right,
is too much. This is too
exactly.
much.
Right. So, when you decide and I mean, I dream of, like, I would love to make music like for film. Like that to me is like this aspiration, like to just be like working with, be in a recording studio and make the sounds that I hear myself in relationship to this dramatic thing that's going on a screen. I would love to do that, but you know how many how many things I would have to master in order
Right.
to be able to do that. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna be adding that to my toolbox.
So going back to what you said earlier about having to take a break for that year or two in 2017 after the group ended.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I have that I want to ask everybody that comes on the show is to explain a moment or a period of time in your life where you almost gave up. And did you feel like that was that moment for you, or did that feel very natural? Did that not feel like, a very abrupt change?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there are two points in my life that come to mind. One is when I was applying to Juilliard and Manhattan School of Music. I had gotten my bachelor's degree in voice performance, and I had in my mind that I wanted to be this voice teacher. I wanted to have like a pristine studio that voice students were waiting outside for their time to come in. Like I had this whole picture in my mind, like to be in a conservatory or someplace like that. And I had applied to Juilliard and to Manhattan School of Music, and it was right before my audition at Manhattan School of Music that I found out I was pregnant with my youngest son. And so I called them up and I was like, oh, I just found out I'm pregnant, so I'm not going to be able to go to school in September or whatever. And I'm like so glad that happened, because that path that I was picturing was like somebody else's dream. That was really not me, but I had it appear in my mind. So even though it wasn't a giving up, I feel like I was on a path of giving up my true self,
Okay.
and it got interrupted in that way, because immediately, like once I wasn't going to go on that path, I got very drawn to studying organizational development, which is not music, but it's systems. And it really was a doorway into another love of mine, which is really looking at whole systems transformation. And the other time that I think of would have been right at the time that I was like leaving my marriage. And I think I just got unhooked from everything that grounded me at that time in my life. And I would say that was probably the most music void period of my life. Like I I lived without a piano. I just wasn't thinking about music at all. Um, so that's another period. I was just trying to see if there was anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's funny. After I did my first album, solo album, um, I was so not happy with that album.
From like a technical standpoint, or just from like.
Yeah, I didn't really enjoy the way it, like when I would put it on, I would be like, oh, like I didn't like. And part of, I mean, the big learning for me in that was I just let myself be handled. Like I felt like I didn't really know stuff. So the folks that were producing me like did their thing, and yeah, just let myself be handled. Just let myself be handled. So I mean, I hate this. I hate when people say, Well, you had to go through that in order to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
But I think I did.
Yeah.
I think I did. Yeah. Hmm.
So with everything that you're telling me, I mean, it seemed like you had a lot of fun experiences, a lot of like expressing yourself and creating what you wanted to create, and kind of being, uh, like in charge of of what you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that is a recipe for your? Do you feel like that was success to you? Or do you feel like you were always lacking or missing something, or do you feel like this was like the life that you wanted to live?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. There's hardly anything that I would kind of want to change on that journey. Um, I mean, I feel like I look back even on Tribe One and I'm like, I had like this whole group of people that just would show up at a rehearsal and I'd be like, so I have this song and it's gonna go like this. And people just learn the music.
That sounds hard to do today.
Yes. They just learned the music and then we performed it. Like, my sister Diane probably wrote, of our repertoire of, let's say, 25 to 30 songs, I think my sister probably wrote three. There was another guy, there was a guy in the group, Benson, who wrote two or three songs. But it was almost like just having these 6 to 12 individuals as your instrument to play. And then sometimes we'd spend the whole rehearsal learning a song and then we would never come back to it again because it was like, oh, that's not feeling right for this group.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of those I'm performing now.
Okay.
Myself, solo. So, yeah, the playground is amazing. Um, the thing I probably miss the most from my real young adult, or even you could say youth years, college years, because I feel like, I was at Oberlin, which had a conservatory. So, I mean, the quality of musicians there were like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You would just tell people, I want to do a show at the end of October. Can you come play bass for it? Can you come play keyboards? Can you come? And you just jam and put on a show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a hard time right now finding one instrumentalist to do a thing for me.
Yeah. No, that was always kind of like at UArts too. Everybody was willing to create.
Yeah.
Everybody just wanted to be a part of something.
That's right.
Everybody would do it for free.
That's right.
In their free time after work, they
That's
will come
right.
through. But
That's
I feel
right.
like I feel like it's even for me, it's like harder and harder and harder to find people that are like, yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, I'll help. Yeah,
Yep.
let's just do this for fun. That's
Yep.
kind of
Yep. Yep. It's rough. It's rough. So, and then the monetizing of everything is a trip. And then I guess I never really finished answering that one question about why I feel like I sacrifice in some ways now in this way. And it's really like both financially, what you make an album and then the album could sit there, or you can try to promote it to a certain degree. And just in 2021, after my album came out, when I think about Google ads and YouTube and Instagram ads and like all this stuff to promote, which is a lot of what record companies would do. And you used to always try to get a record deal. That was your way of doing that. So now you're just putting it out there. And so part of it is the financial investment, but it's also the psychic. Like, at points you ask yourself, like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'll open my Instagram page and I'll be like, Niyonu, like, what is this? What are you doing? Like the amount of money that you spend on a Google ad, you could go and rent a little place and invite a whole bunch
Yeah.
of people to come to a show.
It's crazy how much everything else outside of the art is a factor in it, and
Yeah,
how expensive it is, and how it's hard to focus on one aspect of it. You have to focus on three, four, five aspects of it just to feel
absolutely.
like you can get some eyes on it.
Yeah, to get some. Yeah, because you're like, I'm putting it out in the world to put it out in the world. I'm not,
Right.
you know.
Otherwise, you just play to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which is, I'm telling you, it's starting to be my reward. I like put on my little AirPods and take a walk around the block, put on my music, and be like, this stuff is good.
So how do you? Because like you said, a lot of other peers and friends are starting to fall off and kind of stop doing music as much.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like is different with you as why you're continuing it, and how much money it costs, how much
Yeah.
time it takes? Like
Yeah.
why are you still pursuing that
Right.
to this
Right.
day?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I I had a spiritual reading once, and what was told to me was that I was a generator of energy that fed other people. And she said it in a different way than that, but whichever way she said it, it was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's what I feel. Um, and what she said is, she said a lot of people expend energy and then they get more and more depleted. And what you need to know about yourself is you expend energy and it keeps coming back like this. So I know that's kind of a woo-woo answer to your question, but it does feel like there is nothing that gives me more energy than being in a creative space. Like, nothing.
That's amazing.
Like I think about, the first music video that I did, and I remember the videographer. It was during COVID, so he didn't have any. He couldn't use other people to help with stuff, right? He had his mask on the whole time, and it was when we were being super careful.
Yeah.
So he didn't even he wouldn't hire people. So he was moving everything, because there were outdoor scenes, there were scenes by the water, there were like all these different scenes. But then when he was editing, like he told me how many hours he was editing. And I was just like, I think about like being in the music studio, like when I'm in it and I'm like in it, and time becomes there's like no time, no space. That place is indescribable. Well, it's not indescribable, because I feel like almost every person goes to that place at some point. But it's sort of like, when do you go there? Like, what's the situation?
Right. And so
Yeah.
for you, that's music.
Yeah. For me, that's music, and it's listening for it. It's like the way that I write anyway is like it comes through this channel, and then I'm like, oh, all right, let me like listen more deeply, because there's more to come. And you just kind of go there, you know. I'm clueless as to why other people in my age group are not, why they're like closing shop, or always talking about remember back in the day when we were doing the such and such and such and such with music. And I'm like, yeah, that's fun for a minute,
Right.
but that's all we gonna do? Is that all we gonna do? But A lot of folks, that's just where they are.
Hmm.
It's like back when I was a musician, back when I was a dancer, back when I was a singer. I don't know. I don't get it, Kitty.
Right. It's like we could think about it or talk about it, or maybe we should meet up, have a jam session, and just figure it out.
Have
You
a
know.
jam session. But please, let's do something new. Please. I mean, I'll do a couple of like songs from back in the day, but
Right.
I want new stuff. Yeah.
So I do want to like jump up a little more recently, kind of to how we met and how what we worked on, and talk about that first music video. Um,
Yeah.
I want to say Pour Your Sorrows, but that's the recent one.
That's a more recent one.
Yes.
Yeah, Webstruck was
Webs-
that first
yes.
one. You got yourself stuck.
So talk about like how that, because we have about like 30 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about how like we started working together. I know Majesty had reached out to me at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So was this like January of last year, February of 2022?
Yeah,
Like
it feels
early
like it
spring?
was kind of, yeah, because we had finished doing a video that was like dead in the winter, and then, yeah, the spring.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then I got like a message on Instagram from Majesty, and they were just saying that a musician wants to do a music video, and you know if I'm available, if I'm interested. Um, and I remember having the meeting or having the phone call and just seeing your energy, and then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm on board. Like, you know, I'm always down to do something creative and meet new
Mm-hmm.
people in the process, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the things I really enjoy about kind of the
Mm-hmm.
work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we rented out a space that was beautiful, a bunch of natural light, and we kind of got really creative with the space and with the time that we had. And I
Yeah.
think that was a testament to the creativity of you and the song, and just how, and the song had a lot of meaning to it and a lot of like
Yeah.
symbolism and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of dual meanings to a lot of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the imagery, which is not, I don't do a lot of that kind of work, and I kind of wish I did, because
Mm-hmm.
it's just rewarding to kind of have an idea and then to execute on it, and then to watch it back, and then other people watches it, or there's
Right.
other ideas that come from talking about this idea.
Mm.
So it was really fun for me to work on that project with you. We had a few different people. Graciela at the time was, everybody that was there was like gave positive energy, and it was
Oh,
calming,
it
and
was so, such positive energy. Yeah.
and we did Graciela led us with like a meditation before we got started,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like centering ourselves and just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
appreciating the moment and and what we're
Mm-hmm.
about to do, which I've never done before, which was
Mm-mm.
amazing to me.
Right, right, right.
And I feel like you, throughout that process, and even as we worked on other things beyond that, one of the things I really appreciate about you and kind of your energy is how like flexible you are, and kind of how just open to different
Mm-hmm.
ideas. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes that allows to kind of not make things so rigid, so that we don't have to be stuck with what we said we were going to do. And if it doesn't
Yeah.
feel right in the moment,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we don't
yeah.
have to force anything. And I
Yeah.
feel like things tend to work out a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was such a experience of just, you ever seen those trust exercises where you have to fall back into somebody's arms? That's what that experience felt like, because I literally had no idea of the conception of the video,
Mm.
because what Graciela and I had talked about earlier, she ended up having different ideas for. And so I had never seen the space before. I had not met you in the physical before. Um, I had never, I had done a couple of music videos at that point, but none that were as you know, intentional around a holding space and around a loving space. And so I just was like, yes. I just kept being like, yes, yes. And then when your colleague was, in the other room doing some looking at footage
Hmm.
and doing, I'm like, I don't know what y'all are all what I don't know what y'all are doing.
Yeah, we had Lex in the other room kind of piecing together some of the clips from what we shot during lunch break. So we were able to kind of see something real quick by the end of the day, which I've never done before. But I was like, I always knew
Really?
that that was something that I wanted to do in the future if I had the capacity to do that.
Wow.
Um, and it
Wow.
turned out great. And I feel like that, for me, trying something new is always something that I want to do, incorporate into my shoots. And
Mm,
so for me, that was one of the newer things that
right.
I was able to do and kind of see how my team works and how like everything could be cohesive while we're doing this over here, you're doing that over here. Some of us are helping set up over here. To me, like that flow is something I always want to achieve, and that day
Mm-hmm.
felt good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, did you at least have like a clear sense of, okay, now we're going to do a scene that's about this, and now we're going to do a scene?
For the editing.
No, no, when you were shooting, because there was the whole rope
Yep.
scene. There was like then us laying down
Yeah.
scene. There was when we're gonna be dancing with each other.
Yeah, I know. Like another thing that was great about that music video was I was less of like the director and more of the
Right,
cinematographer,
right,
which
right.
Graciela, I believe, kind of had everything written out and the structure and things like that. So we were really just following their
Yeah,
kind of sequence of how things happened, which was nice to kind of not have to worry about so many different things at once and kind of just
right.
focus on doing the camera work.
And
Um,
normally, are you more director,
Normally both director and
direct,
shooter,
and yeah,
which can sometimes be
a
a lot
lot?
to do at both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, you did amazing with Pour Your Sorrows
oh, thank
in
you.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that with Alexander too. That was another example of just we had talked about maybe for 2 3 weeks about different ideas, maybe even a month, about the concept and kind of kept evolving. We kept sharing videos back and forth with each other and
It was
different
definitely
links.
evolving. It definitely went a long way from the original idea.
Yeah, it kind of was started as something more simple at first, kind of with some themes of water as like the main
Right,
core.
right,
Um, and
right,
then we ended up going out in the field and with flowers and trees
right.
and mirrors and
Redness and green and drones
yeah.
and well, I mean, yeah, that's my favorite way to work. If I can work like that, which no matter what, that's an and that it takes a certain amount of trust.
Hmm.
Like once again, it wasn't. I didn't feel like I was falling into your arms quite as much as I did with Webstruck. Um, but it definitely, I could feel the vibe of that you would discern something, because remember we're going to do all white and we
Yeah.
ended up like so far from that. So, and that was you.
Yeah, and I think even with that too, multiple times, even after for the Webstruck video, we wanted to do like a post video interview sort of thing
Yeah,
that we did.
right.
And I remember even then trying to coordinate times for everybody to hop on the Zoom call for that. And um, even with
Mm,
Pour Your Sorrows, it was kind of raining a few times that we wanted to shoot. So we was like, oh, let's just do it next week and let's not.
right.
It was very, I remember you saying, like, the energy doesn't, if the energy isn't feeling right, let's not
Right.
force it or
Yeah.
something along the lines. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
you don't want to just do it just because we agreed on it on this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing that, and I was like, that's actually really cool because I know,
Mm-hmm.
especially for the
Mm-hmm.
podcast recap of Webstruck, I know we were like all texting back and forth for like a week or two, and we
Right.
finally picked a date, and then that date was coming up, and then things weren't working out,
Right. Right.
and I
Right.
felt like bad that like this thing just wasn't being able to get done. And then to
Yeah.
get that text from you that was like, oh, it's okay, we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like, oh, like this is like, it was refreshing to kind of get that energy, like,
Yeah.
like that we can just go at the pace that's natural.
Go at the pace that's natural.
And I feel like you
Yeah.
do really well at that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, for years, members of Tribe One would like get on me about, because we'd have a set list, and then we would never, the performance would never be that. And I'd be like, I'm only giving y'all a set list because you want to
Yeah.
have this thing. But, if the energy in the room is like this, we're going to be moving it around. So they would just joke.
So let's transition a little bit into like the exclusive content that will be on buymeacoffee.com. Some questions that, because I think there's somebody coming in after us at 8, so I just want to make sure we have enough time to get through this and let them have time to set up.
Like, if high school education was for the purpose of liberation, what would it be? Like, until you go somewhere else, like if you're just think of everything in terms of the bubble that you've been in, but you go someplace else and all kinds of things, all kinds of notions and ideas of who people are or what you can do. When you just said that, I thought about Harriet Tubman, like trying to guide people to a certain level of freedom, and then sometimes having to pull out a gun and say, like, because they wanted to go back. They wanted to go back.
Sometimes it's like people call it, they want to say what's up to you just so they can not feel bad about talking about themselves.
You know this one too well.
We're very similar, it sounds like. So. Well,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, unfortunately, it's 8:00, so we have to get out of here.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed having you on and talking about everything that you're going through and hearing about your story and kind of how you got to where you are.
Thank you.
And yeah, and just thank you for kind of reaching out to me and trusting me with your projects and allowing us to work together in such a great way. I appreciate
Got another
that.
one coming down the pike.
Well, awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kenny.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
This was relaxing. This is comfortable too.
I know. Yeah, it's hard to get up for me.